There are over 6.5 million deaths per year attributed to air pollution. 99% of the global population breathes air that is lower quality than the World Health Organization guidelines. This indicates that the air contains high levels of pollutants, compromising the health of many. Low and middle income countries continue to suffer the most from low air quality. Telling a story of air pollution cannot be separated from a history of segregation. This is a 1912 segregation ordinance enacted by Winston-Salem's Board of Aldermen. Segregation laws between 1912 and 1940 concentrated Winston-Salem's Black population in East Winston-Salem and along what would become the US 52 corridor. Even after those laws were struck down, they continued to shape where Black people could live. These laws exacerbated the environmental impacts, particularly the air pollution, that minority and low-income communities faced. One of the places where these communities could afford to live was around the Winston Weaver plant. According to the Environmental Protection Agency's Environmental Justice Screening and Mapping Tool, about 51% of roughly 6,500 people who live within a mile of Winston Weaver are Black, and 26% are Hispanic. The per capita annual income in the area is $17,423, well short of Forsyth County's $30,769. The area within a mile of the Winston Weaver is in the 91st percentile nationally for exposure to fine particulate matter in the air, the 93rd percent nationally for exposure to ozone, and the 92nd percent for cancer risk from air quality, according to the EPA's screening tool.
The World Health Organization defines air pollution as the presence of one or more contaminants in the atmosphere, such as dust, fumes, gas, mist, odor, smoke, or vapor, in quantities and duration that can be injurious to human health. In general, exposure to air pollutants can cause inflammation, oxidative stress, immunosuppression, and mutagenicity throughout the body. The impact and damage that air pollution can cause depend on the types and concentrations of present air pollutants. There are 3 categories of air pollution, and these are defined by the particles in the air. These are coarse particles, or PM10, fine particles, or PM2.5, and ultrafine particles, or PM0.1. Coarse particles are mostly stopped by our lungs and aren't typically dangerous to our health. This tends to be wind-blown dust and similar particles. Fine particles are 2.5 microns or smaller and can have impacts on our lungs and overall health, but aren't as dangerous as ultrafine particles. Ultrafine particles are 100 nanometers or smaller and can travel into the lungs. These particles can diffuse directly into the bloodstream. Once there, these particles circulate throughout the body. These particles are linked with cancer, diabetes, stroke, ischemic heart disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, lung cancer, pneumonia, and cataracts. Any of these conditions can lead to death. If they travel to the brain, cerebral dysfunction can occur. Ultrafine particles typically are formed from traffic exhaust or diesel exhaust. There are 4 primary causes of air pollution. These are mobile, stationary, area, and natural sources. Mobile sources include cars, trains, and transportation, accounting for over 50% of air pollution in the U.S. The second source is stationary. Sources are primarily power plants and factories. This leads to high levels of air pollution in concentrated areas. Area sources have a smaller contribution to the overall air pollution, including agricultural areas and wood-burning fireplaces. The final source, natural sources, include wind-blown dust, wildfires, volcanoes, and other natural disasters. These sources typically circulate the air pollutants more, but do not create more particles. The effects of poor air quality have become extreme. Poor air quality causes 4 million deaths each year from outdoor pollutants and 2.3 million deaths from indoor pollutants. Research shows that air pollution affects poorer communities at a much higher rate and is one of the leading causes of death in low-income communities. This can be largely attributed to the fact that low-income communities have less air quality regulations, more congested transport systems, and more polluting machinery. Additionally, the lower-paying jobs in these communities are more likely to increase people's exposure to air pollution as they are more physically demanding outdoor jobs. The Clean Air Act is a federal law established to monitor air pollution emissions in 1963. The act was implemented to address the 6 major pollutants that are deemed harmful to human health. The Clean Air Act established standards for each state as well as state implementation plans. Overall, there have been several accomplishments under these federal laws, including large reductions in air pollution, which has helped to hinder the amount of health problems Americans are at risk of facing each year. Since then, various changes and additions have been made to the Act. In 1967, air pollution research was expanded to improve the established laws. 3 years later, in 1970, 4 different programs were established to regulate the Act: the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, State Implementation Plans, New Source Performance Standards, and National Emission Standards for hazardous air pollutants. Additionally, requirements were set for motor vehicle emissions. In 1977, requirements were made for non-attainment or geographical areas that did not meet the previously set federal standards for air quality. This was aimed to ensure that all areas in the U.S. had regulated air quality standards. In 1990, the NAAQS standards were revised and expanded. This newest addition to the Act aimed to slowly decrease the amount of chemicals used in the U.S. that weaken the ozone level to attempt to combat the damage that has been done.
Although national air pollution emissions are declining, the impacts of air pollution on a local level are still felt by disenfranchised communities due to a history of discriminatory laws. In an old Gold and Black article on the environmental racism uncovered by the Weaver Fire, Dean Walker, head of Wake Forest African American Studies Department, pointed out that low-income, primarily African American residents being affected by industrial environmental tragedies are not an uncommon or new phenomenon. Dean Walker stated, "The proximity of the affected communities to Weaver isn't just some isolated happening. If you start to look at the history of Winston-Salem, you can see a land use pattern develop, going all the way back where Negro tenements were located in relation to the railways passing through Winston. Through an effort to strengthen affordable housing so that low-income and minority families aren't forced to only live in certain neighborhoods, we can begin to eliminate geographical discrimination. There is much room for improvement and inclusivity in Winston-Salem's environmental approach to policy, but with positive action, the city will see change in the coming years."